And this might be an assumption that I shouldn't make, but are we also looking at wherever we decide to cite these, how it will potentially impact other already established immersion programs, right? I mean, if it's close to my neighborhood, well, that's where all our kids used to come from, another.
Absolutely, absolutely. Judy's been really great in working with us, and we're looking at different models. If we start a program here, what will be the impact on all the surrounding schools and even the high schools as we go all the way through 12th grade. So
great. And the last two things I want to say. The first one is I had a parent ask me when we were going through the budget discussion last year about the Chinese immersion program, where the principal had decided to reduce to bring some equity so that the students in the neighborhood program didn't have 37 kids in their kindergarten class. But they wondered if in part of our feasibility study we ever looked at the global market rather than just as an ESL, but if we talk about global citizens, how do we evaluate which is an emerging market, or what would best position our students in a global society? Are we looking at that? Yeah, which language, in deciding what language. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yes, we are looking at that. We're in conversation with community businesses. It's actually interesting. Through the Portland Metro STEM Partnership, we do have a lot of conversations occurring with industry partners around Asian Pacific Rim languages and the fact that there's a much greater need than we're actually producing here. So languages such as Vietnamese, languages such as Chinese are highly sought after, and we really believe that is going to help recruitment as well, getting as many of those industry voices as we can into the conversation so people can see how we can become global leaders through this kind of expansion.
But are we seeking any data rather than anecdotal connection person to person?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at local industry data.
Okay, great.
Which brings us into the whole discussion that I think you've been having, Superintendent Smith, at the state level about our teacher prep programs and the fact that we need to be trying to attract and recruit more bilingual students into the teacher prep program. So that's another big piece of it. I mean, when you talk about implementing well, we need to have teachers who speak the language well.
Just sort of a question as we move forward. I mean, I think I absolutely support that our highest priority needs to be through the equity lens to serve our students of color and to close the achievement gap. So that's the priority here and what you're planning. But as we move forward, hopefully with more expansions year on year, are we also potentially at a place where if there's demand, I mean, even though the one-way, could we potentially expand even if we don't have enough native speakers of that language where we could expand just to provide it, even though that's a lower priority at this point, and I totally support and get that we can continue expansion even beyond the two-way.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're not just looking at the one-way model. I mean, yields results that are better than average for sure. But we're, even as we look at the Jefferson cluster, where we don't necessarily have emerging bilinguals, we are looking at a one-way model there, and there's nothing to keep us from looking at one-way models and pockets of the district where we don't have emerging bilinguals.
Yeah, no, that's
Like the west side, too.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We have
Absolutely.
one.
There's zero.
Going to show my ignorance here. I wish I was. I'm a big immersion fan, but I don't know very much because I haven't really worked in that area. I haven't really gotten out in those. Wish I was someone like Mr. Morton who really knows this area. I mean, he's fabulous at it. So I'm going to kind of stick to what I know a little bit in my questions. And one of them is, one of the things that came to mind is the education of these children. I mean, I see this charts, which is basically test scores. In other words, these immersion programs, which I really think are wonderful, are we actually making sure that we're getting these children good, solid educations? Are we doing that, or I mean, with so much pressure on the testing and the immersion programs to show that it's a good deal, does that move us away from good education, or would you say? I mean, what do you do to make sure that we're not just focused solely on the idea of people speaking a second language, which is wonderful, but there's millions of people in this country who speak a second language and have really poor educations.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Good.
The research was done on standardized assessments, and that was through the country, and that was on each state's individual state assessment. But like you're saying, we know that there's benefits to bilingualism that are cognitive, and that there's benefits to being bicultural that just kind of make life more enjoyable. I would invite you to come to one of our immersion program schools and to enjoy some of the culture learning that students are doing. And I think that you would see that there's definitely benefits to our students that go way beyond what we can put on a graph.
Or we, for instance, like making sure that we're teaching civics in those schools.
Absolutely.
So we're teaching civics in those schools. We got other schools that really maybe aren't teaching civics very much at all. And are we teaching civics more or less in these schools? Or, I mean...
Yeah, the state standards and
No, I'm not
what we
talking
want
about those.
students learning at all of our schools is the same for sure. But when you go into an immersion program, there's definitely a different spin. They tend to have teachers that are diverse, and they bring their culture to the classroom and help students become multicultural through that process. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
No, but we can talk about it when we have more time and we're not
Okay.
taking everybody's deal. Ms. Goff, I have a great deal of admiration and respect for you, but you didn't answer the question on alleviating the tensions. What do we do to deal with that? And maybe we could turn the question around and say, what do we do to make sure those tensions don't arise? Because they arise. I mean, I know they are just from people telling me, yeah, there's a lot of tension here in this
So-
building.
Right, so let me go back to the first question you asked, because I do think
Okay.
perhaps
Good.
I am able to address it. I hope. I hope you'll feel it's answered
Good
at
luck.
the end. So in our dual language immersion programs, teachers are teaching the content they're using the language to teach the content. So it
Yes,
isn't
okay.
only focused on second
Right,
language acquisition.
right,
It is
right.
also focused on content knowledge, so science or math or
Well,
literacy or
does the
social
content go
studies.
beyond the standards into other types of content that we should also be teaching other than the standards?
It will go into cultural content that is applicable to that given language, but our charge is to teach the state standards of Oregon, so that's really where we were making sure that all of our teachers are focusing their efforts.
Well, I was just, there's standards and there's standards, you know, we both know that. There's different types of things that you teach that maybe are in the standards that don't necessarily get taught, or vice versa, that should be taught that aren't. So, okay.